If you are from Tehama County, then you've witnessed the drastic homeless and drug crisis that our community has been experiencing. However, you could randomly point your finger at any town on a map of the U.S., and that community is having its own crisis. Crime is out of control, and far too many people are dying. According to a statistic released by the Center for Disease Control dated May 15, 2024, there were 81,083 opioid-related overdose deaths nationwide in 2023. And it isn't only happening on the streets either. People suffering from addiction are not other. They are your neighbors. They go to your churches. They hold degrees from the very college you're attending right now. My experience with addiction has led me to where I stand today, and I have seen these statistics play out. In the next few minutes, I will tell you why I believe medication-assisted treatment, or MAT, is the most effective way to address the opioid crisis in our communities. I'll provide information about the drugs used in treatment and talk about the decades-old stigma surrounding these treatments. Addressing chronic drug use is far more complicated than quitting using a substance. Within 24 hours of an individual's last use, withdrawal symptoms are in full effect. Symptoms can last from 2 to 4 weeks, ranging from muscle aches to high blood pressure and vomiting. After that, the challenge begins of managing cravings and stabilizing a person's life. In an article in Psychology Today, dated January 2015, Shahram Heshmat, PhD, defines craving as, quote, an overwhelming emotional experience that takes over the body and produces a unique motivator to seek the substance. According to B. Smythe and colleagues in a 2010 article in the Irish Medical Journal called Lapse and Relapse Following Inpatient Treatment of Opiate Dependence, as much as 91% of those in opioid recovery will relapse. Meaning, without intervention, they will go back to their same behaviors and struggles. This is where medication-assisted treatment comes in. These drugs arrest the symptoms of withdrawal, eliminating the associated discomfort, and at therapeutic doses also reduce cravings. Methadone and Suboxone are two common drugs used to combat this cycle of relapse in opioid use disorder. The origins of methadone trace back to 1940s Germany. However, according to an article from the Rockefeller University in December 2016 called 50 Years After Landmark Methadone Discovery, Stigmas and Misunderstandings Still Persist. The study of methadone's use as a treatment for opioid addiction was conducted here in the United States by Mary Creek and her associates at the Rockefeller University in 1966. It soon became the standard, leading the way for another option in use today, Suboxone. Released in 2002, Suboxone acts much the same way that methadone does, arresting withdrawal and reducing cravings. Stigma surrounding medications used in opioid treatment often lead to barriers for many individuals who seek help. As stated in a May 2015 article in the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine by Stroud, Posey, and Bain, quote, following a regulatory history derived from the politics of stigma and distrust, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Bureau of Narcotics instituted stringent access restrictions, end quote. These restrictions have created barriers that have affected affordability, as well as discrimination and inequalities in healthcare and criminal justice settings. Now that I have provided a bit of background information about the types of MAT available and barriers to treatment, I will present an argument against the use of medication assistance in treatment. While MAT helps manage opioid addiction, critics argue it is trading one addiction for another. According to an article in Psychology Today by Adi Jaffe, PhD, in October 2018, quote, MAT certainly involves risk. Drugs used for substitution can be abused and there is a black market for them. At high enough quantities and using different administration methods, the drugs can get users high and can be addictive in their own right. Another argument amongst critics is that long-term methadone maintenance can have its own set of adverse effects. In a 2021 article for addictionresource.net by behavioral clinician Kelly Jones, methadone withdrawal will still occur if a patient misses a dose, as well as sleep disturbances, sexual side effects, weight gain, and changes in mood. Jones goes on to say a minimum of 12 months of treatment is recommended, but there is no timeline for how long a patient will take methadone. This will depend on individual factors such as progress in treatment, goals that the individual sets with their recovery team. And finally, critics of MAT argue the high cost of MAT programs constrain healthcare budgets, which could be used for other areas of mental health, such as addiction prevention. According to Cynthia Cox, Jared Ordaliza and Emma Wagner in an article from May 2024 from kff.org entitled Healthcare Costs and Affordability. Quote, in the United States, healthcare spending has been rising steadily, with total health expenditures reaching $4.5 trillion in 2022. This includes spending on public programs like Medicaid, which often covers MAT for eligible individuals. The high cost of these programs constrains state and federal budgets, end quote. In a public policy statement released by the American Society for Addiction Medicine in October 2021, quote, in the United States, methadone for opioid use disorder can only be dispensed through certified opioid treatment programs. This regulation ensures that methadone is administered safely and effectively under strict medical supervision, end quote. However, these regulations do lead to the higher cost of these treatments. Now that I have made the argument against treatment with medication, I would like to provide the argument for such solutions to this nationwide crisis. In an article dated June 2018, the National Institute for Drug Addiction states, people who take opioids for long periods of time typically develop tolerance. The brain is continually exposed to high levels of opioids, as well as dopamine, which is released in the reward circuit following opioid receptor activation. Brain cells respond to this by reducing their response to receptor activation and by removing opioid and dopamine receptors from the cell membrane, resulting in fewer receptors that can be activated by the drug, end quote. In other words, by the time an addicted person is breaking into your car or sleeping in front of your favorite coffee shop, that person is not getting high. They're trapped in a cycle of use, withdrawal, and attempts at detox that for many will end in death. At prescribed doses, treatment medications do not produce a euphoric high, but instead minimize withdrawal symptoms and cravings. This makes it possible for a person to function normally and participate in support services. Essentially, they can get their lives back. The length of time an individual participates in MAT maintenance programs will be different for each person. It is recommended for at least 12 months. However, some folks only participate for 6 months, while others will need treatment for much longer. Some patients use one treatment or another indefinitely, as it can be used as a sustainable and stable alternative to pain management. Is drug addiction treatment worth it? Yes. The answer is a resounding yes. The cost of treating opioid use disorder is much less than the cost of accidental overdoses that require emergency transport, hospitalization, and the resources of the criminal justice system. An article by the National Institute on Drug Abuse dated January 2018 states, substance abuse costs our nation over $600 billion annually, and treatment can help reduce these costs drastically. For example, the average cost of one full year of methadone maintenance treatment is approximately $4,700 per patient, whereas one full year of imprisonment costs approximately $24,000 per person. Please use this information I've presented with you today as a guide how you might be asked to vote on future measures involving the homelessness issue or criminal justice reform for drug offenses. If the question of whether or not to fund these state treatment models is ever presented in our community, voice your support. And lastly, if you were ever in the heartbreaking situation to provide support for an opioid-addicted loved one, please help end the stigma of getting treatment. Thank you.